Surf Taco Jackson is stoked to offer one of the most unique craft beer selections in the area, including local New Jersey brews. We also offer brewery nights once a month, and Tuesday nights are craft beer nights featuring $1 off craft beers. You can find our current tap lineup and beers on deck by visiting our Facebook page or website at surftaco.com. Come on out to Surf Taco Jackson and enjoy a nice craft beer with our epic food and friendly staff at 21 South Hope Chapel Road in the Jackson Crossing Shopping Center.
Hi there, I'm Augie Carton of Carton Brewing. Welcome to Atlantic Highlands. Welcome to our brewery. Come on inside. So this is Carton Brewing inside the old warehouse. The warehouse was built in the late 1880s, early 1890s as a storage for tents for the Methodist community that would come down and build tents every summer that established Atlantic Highlands. We took it over January 2011, started turning it into a brewery, and we opened in August of 2011. The old warehouse, which is from the Make Tasty Beer sign to the windows, is pretty much dry storage. The only part of brewing we're doing here is mill. The mill is contained behind that wall because it's a dusty process and we want to isolate it from the rest of everything so we can close it off and vent it. Otherwise, our tasting room and all our storage of things like new kegs and malts and hops are in here and ready to work in the brewery, which is in the warehouse portion of the building that was built in the 50s. We know it's 50s sometime. We don't have a lot of detail on it. So come on into the brewery. All right, so here we are in the brew house. The malted barley comes up this auger tube and goes into the mash tun. In the mash tun, you're basically steeping sugar from the cracked malted barley to try to get a certain amount of volume of liquid at a certain sugar level that will later become the food for the yeast that will turn it into beer. And, so you combine different malts to get different, flavor dynamics. And you get them out into the liquid. Once the liquid is where you want it to be, you move it over to the boil kettle. Ideally, you end up with a volume of liquid at a certain amount of sugar, and here you boil it, clean it up, and you add hops to counteract the sweetness of the malt. Boils in there about an hour, and then it's ready to be moved over to the cellar side. Before it moves to the cellar side, it goes through a chiller, because right now it's about 200, and that would scald and kill the yeast. So you take it down to about 70, 65 degrees, and go over to the cellar side we'll go to next. That third vessel is called a hot liquor tank. It's literally not much more than on-demand hot water. All of this process requires a lot of hot water, and having some ready to go just makes it a lot more efficient. So it's about 1,000 gallons of boiling water for when you need it somewhere else. This is the cellar side of Carton Brewing. We have 3 30-barrel fermenters. So the brew house you're just looking at is a 15-barrel brew house. These are 30-barrel fermenters, so 2 brews combine in here to be 1. And once the wort is in here with the yeast, you're making beer. We have recipes that range from 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on what we're looking for in the end. And when it comes out of here, it's beer. When it comes out of here, it goes in the bright tank at the end, where you make it very cold and try to precipitate any proteins left in suspension, anything hanging out. And then we keg right off that. And once in the kegs, it goes in our walk-in, and it's ready to go to the bars in New Jersey. The other interesting thing in here is this. This is our tippy. We're actually brewing today, so it's getting warm right now. But it's essentially everything you just looked at on a smaller scale. So you got your hot liquor tank, your mash tun, your boil kettle, and it's got its own little fermenter over here. And this is where we pilot, develop our flavors, or just make beer. So we're making beer and we're talking about beer flavors. Sometimes what's in there goes no further than upstairs to taste with, the community and talk about flavors. And sometimes it turns into our next beer, depending on what we're after and what we're doing. Anyway, come on over here. I'll show you the walk-in. Once it's done coming out of the bright and goes into kegs, it goes into here, which is our walk-in. We've got 4 different beers running right now, so they're up and down the wall in different keg sizes. They come out of here, roll up this ramp, go out to our trucks and to the bars in New Jersey. In the middle is our grain from a brew we did last Friday. We have a local farm in Middletown that'll come pick that up, and they feed it to goats. And in the end, it keeps us from dumping a lot of spent cereal grain somewhere other than into goats. So that's Carton Brewing. Let's go upstairs and taste some beer. Welcome to the tasting room at Carton Brewing. This is where we sample our beers, and we fill growlers at the end of a tour, which are these guys up here. Let's see. First beer up is Boat. Boat's our session ale. We're big drinkers of American IPAs. There's a million out there we love, but they tend to be very high in alcohol. So we worked on a sessionable version. So it's super hoppy, lots of American hops. 4.2% alcohol, so a very drinkable beer. Won't send you to the couch for the night. What we've worked in here is what we're hoping is the complexity to keep it interesting over a day of drinking. So when you first drink Boat, it's going to be very grapefruity and very piney with a strong attack, nice and cold, stop you from being thirsty. And then as you move on to a second and third and it sits on the bar a little longer, rather than getting uninteresting or even bad, it should develop and turn into kind of white stone fruits, thyme, a little more friendly versions of all that, and stay interesting through a couple as a sessionable beer should. The next one I'm going to pour is our milk stout, which is our other session ale. Here, rather than going for a sweet stout, which milk stouts tend to be, we've gone for a kind of drier version, but again, at 4% alcohol, we want it to be something you drink a couple of over a day with friends. So we need it to stay interesting past just one. So what we've done here is take a very, very, very big malt bill and use the milk additions to counteract that like you would cream and coffee. So rather than adding sweetness like a typical milk stout, here it's just kind of tempering the hard edges of a big roasty malt bill. So when you start off, it's going to give you something like chocolate or coffee while it's cold, but again, as it warms, you'll evolve through all the other roasty notes. And you know, the milk is just kind of teasing it out. Another interesting thing we do with this beer is we add all our hops in the middle of the boil, because we want all the perceived bitterness to come from the malts and not from the hops. So we use a bouillon hop, which has a neat black currant kind of swampy note. It just sits through the middle, tying everything together and not being a bittering agent or an aromatic agent. Next up is BDG, which is Brunch Dinner Grub. One of the places we think the beer community isn't paying enough attention is the idea of a table beer for food. Beers are either striving to be kind of boring or everything to everybody in a glass. And we wanted just something that if you were coming home on a Wednesday night, you couldn't remember what was in your fridge, but you might roast a chicken, you might boil a pound of pasta and put a jar of sauce on it, you might make a burger. We wanted a table beer to sit there. So here we've used a French hop called Aramis that we think gives notes of lemon, cracked white pepper, thyme, and tarragon, and put that against a very bread crusty malt bill. The idea being bread goes with almost everything you would ever want to eat. So playing to the parts of beer that evokes bread, was the way to go. And then finally we have our double IPA, American Double. Here we're very careful at Carton not to change the water. We carbon filter to take chlorine out, but on that we leave it alone because we think there's a very pretty salty kind of calcium mineraliness to the water in Monmouth County, particularly in the Atlantic Highlands side of this mountain range or hill range. And we try to let that water show to tie together a kind of classically American IPA. So it's got all those big kind of fruity hops, mangoes, grapefruit, lemons, papaya, all those flavors, a lot of pine, some really dank green smells, and a little bit of malt sweetness. And then again, our water line through the middle, stitching those two together to be what we've branded as an East Coast IPA, because we don't think anybody else makes one quite like it. And then the other thing about the tasting room is the orange knuckle. When we were downstairs, I showed you the tippy system. We always bring up something just to kind of taste with everybody that we probably will or won't sell. But just so our community's participating in the conversation with us about what flavors are good and bad. Today it's a porter We started off with a pretty simple spiced porter recipe with no spices added to it, and tried it on 3 different yeasts to see where it would go. This is the 3rd yeast. Of the 3, we like it second best. It's called London. It's got a neat kind of woody flavor on the palate that I don't think is as drinkable as we would want it to be in the long run, but it was an interesting learning thing. And if you've been in the tasting room for the last 3 weekends, which some people have, you've had this beer on 3 different yeasts, and you got to tell us which one you liked best, and we got to tell you which one we liked best, and somewhere from it, hopefully our porter down the road will be a more interesting beer because of the conversation. Anyway, thanks for coming. We'll see you soon.